And hello, everybody. Thank you for the first program here of the year for the CDT prep course. We're going to be talking about the planning and pre-design services. We're going to be talking about delivery processes also. Some of the important concepts to remember is regarding the tripartite relationship, the team roles and responsibilities again. Remember that the CDT exam is based on the principles and the guidelines in this, and we're basing this off the project delivery practice guide. Important slides are identified with some plus signs that you'll see in the upper left-hand corner. And with that, I will turn it over to Suchi Daniels. Suchi?
Hi, everybody. So I'll admit I'm a little nervous here, but you know that this is approved by the AIA. I'm not going to go through all this, but it's 1 CE hour. Learning objectives. Not going to necessarily read through all these, but highlight the fact that what we want to focus on are programming and pre-design activities, the key aspects of feasibility studies and activities, roles and responsibilities, the tripartite relationship, and project delivery methods, advantages and disadvantages. And I'll probably say this again when we get to project delivery methods. The exam, I took this some time ago, but what they really want you to understand is they'll give you a scenario type question and ask you which project delivery method might work best. So in some cases, some of this material, you just need to know the terms, and then in some cases, they'll ask you to apply them. Okay. So this is our outline. 2 main areas, project conception and project delivery. So for project conception, we're going to talk about programming, planning, and pre-design. And we talk about feasibility and impact, site, project, and scheduling. Project delivery, we're going to talk about design and construction services and documentation required. Again, the tripartite relationship, factors that affect project delivery, and that is another important area that will be addressed on the exam. Contract types, and again, these would be questions about contracts in terms of a situation and where you would do that. Delivery methods, we're going to talk about IPD, and we're going to compare the delivery methods, a little bit about team selection, and about commissioning. So we're going into this first area. So project conception. So I'm just going to go on ahead. So this is probably one of the most important parts of CSI, and what they want to stress is the facility life cycle project conception stage is what we're going to talk about specifically, but the fact that this is a cycle and it continues through the life of the building. So at this particular stage, we're going to discuss due diligence investigations, site selection, programming, performance criteria, and anticipating cost of work and project schedule. CDT and CSI, the reference book for programming is the HOK book, Problem Seeking. You can see the plus sign there and highlighted in yellow, the basic premise. And the key words would be methodically analyzing problems and proposing objectives for a course of action. And this book is referenced. I think that from these slides that you could probably get the basic information you need, but you do need to be familiar with this book and the basic ideas. So facility programming, I'm just going to cheat a second here and get my notes. wanted to talk to you about function, form, economy, and time. 4 considerations: function, form, economy, and time. So that's what you see here on your slide on the left of that table. And then under each one of those, you will find additional criteria. So according to this problem-seeking book, and again, you're going to be tested on what's in this book, what is considered programming for this exam specifically. So for this exam, it's a 2-phase process. There's a schematic programming and a program development. And again, 4 considerations. Understand that these are the identified 4 considerations for the exam: function, form, economy, and time. Keywords under function are people, activities, and relationships. Keywords for form are site, environment, and notice it says quality. For economy, we have initial budget, operating, and life cycle costs. And under time, we have 3 classifications: past, present, and future. And again, you know, we all know, we've all learned this one way or the other, but just remember that this is how you want to approach the exam, is with these particular definitions and identifications. So the problem-seeking process, there's 5 steps. And again, they're not going to ask you something like how many steps, but they might list steps and say which is not a step. It's going to be that type of question. So the 5 steps: establish goals, collect and analyze facts, uncover and test concepts, determine needs, and state the problem. So this is an example. This is one example of a facility program. I don't want to go into too much detail. There'll be another example coming up, which is similar to something that's evolved from a bubble diagram. And I think the key here, regardless of which program you look at, whether it's this one or this one, what we're talking about is that spaces have a hierarchy, a functional, and a priority relationship with one another. Okay, again, we're going back to criteria, and this was on one of the previous slides. It was a table, and again, what are the 4 considerations? They're function, time, economy, form. And this is going to be on the exam. And highlighted in yellow, again, referencing the guide, there will be an expanded reference 6.1 in your guide for the expanded list of performance criteria. And again, the questions are going to be what would not be a criteria. In this case, what they're showing are performance factor checklists, such as amenity and comfort, health and safety, structure, durability, operational, and maintenance. We're going to move on, and now we're going to start going down to the next item under project conception, which is feasibility and impact studies. So keep going there. So due diligence investigations. Again, you see the red plus sign. So the importance of due diligence investigations, feasibility, is determining project viability and whose responsibility is it? And that's the type of question you're going to see on the exam. You will find these different activities, and they will, ask you to identify whose responsibility it is. And under this, we have the financial studies. We have community impact studies, site studies, which include environmental issues, hazardous issues, geotech, archaeological surveys, and other government.
Yeah, one of the comments to be made here is that although we may be actually helping clients quite often doing these due diligence investigations. They say that it's the owner's responsibilities, and this is primarily because, again, we're referring back to the AIA B101 agreement, and this would be considered an additional service. This is not part of basic services, although, I'm just finishing up one and about to start another one of these same things.
And that's absolutely true. This is the owner's responsibility. It is an additional service. And speaking from the owner's side, it's a very important service. It does help the owner assess whether that project is viable on a particular site. Okay, we're going to still be under our first topic of project conception. Now we're going to talk about site selection. So, new facilities, you're going to either have an existing site, a renovation on it, or a new site. And under either of these examples, you still need to evaluate the site and location, marketability, the land development regulations, surrounding conditions, other site concerns, acquisition and purchase, and hazardous material mitigation. Now notice that marketability is in red and hazardous material mitigation, because the cost of mitigating any hazardous material on that site might deter someone from building on that. And these are things that if you are hired for these services, that you would advise your client. There's a red plus sign again, and there may be time restrictions on site due to the diligence evaluations.
Yeah, when you're working with developers in particular, they may just have 30 days before they have to close on a site, and they want to get their due diligence done quickly.
Now we are still, and I like to really, the outline form really helps me. So that's why I keep wanting to emphasize that our outline, we're still under project conception. We've now moved down to project budget. So anticipating the cost of work. So it's important to know the cost of a new facility before we proceed too far. And I'm sure you've all been on projects where you get down the road and the financing isn't available, or the program needs to be reevaluated. And you want to look at cost throughout the entire design process. And the other main thing to know here is that you shouldn't confuse the idea of a budget cost with a construction cost. And what we're talking about are project budget costs versus the actual cost of construction. And what the AE would prepare is an estimate of probable cost. So funding. So source of funding influences what delivery method that the project might use. So we either have private funding or we have public. Private is competitively bid or negotiated, and I think that's important to know, that even that's an advantage of private funding, that you can negotiate, and any project delivery method is available. Public funding, it requires that that we have competition and fair competition with the use of any public funding. This is another important graph. I'll tell you, I'm not a real big fan of diagrams, but this is a time and cost. And what the most important thing you want to understand about this is that you can see that early on in the project, you have the most ability to influence cost, which is kind of different than the way projects usually evolve. But that is the most important time for all parties involved to put their input into whatever it might be, whether it's the engineering systems, site, and because as time goes on, there will be less time to influence costs. So I'll just go ahead and here it says this illustrates why the CM or the IPD project delivery methods are beneficial. Decisions early in the process have the greatest impact on the cost of the project. And again, we want to kind of change this around where our engineers have a lot of input on the front end, because we, again, don't want to go backwards in terms of design. So within a project budget, we have hard costs and soft costs. It's important to know the difference between those two. So soft costs are intangible costs. They're not associated with the physical or direct construction costs of the project. And we've got a list here of some of the costs associated. And one of the questions that you might get on the exam is, are site surveys a hard cost or a soft cost? So do you know the answer to that? I'd have to write it down. So anyway, these are the types of things that they will do. So soft costs is basically something that is intangible. It's something you cannot touch. And again, I think it's important to note here that zoning and variance fees are a soft cost. So now we're going to talk about hard costs. So we have site-related costs. So the site survey, which was in this previous question, I'm just going to go back, right? The question was, are site surveys hard costs or soft costs? Site survey is part of the site and it's a hard cost. We have construction costs and we have the furniture, furnishings, fixture furnishings, and equipment costs. And this has 2 plus signs because, again, you will get questions more than once on, is this a hard cost or a soft cost? And note that the Division 1 sections of the specifications address administrative and procedural elements of the construction phase, and the fact that these procedures have an impact on the cost of work. Again, I think that's important to note. Most people don't realize the importance of Division 1 and the impact that it's going to have. It involves I'm sure you'll go through this later, but there's a lot of information about testing, expectations, and it's important for all parties to be very familiar with Division 1, but it's one of those sections that people tend to like to skip, I guess, or glaze over. But even for the exam, it's important to understand the role of Division 1. So we're going to talk about the difference between a project budget and a construction budget. And the way I view CSI and CDT is very language intensive. So pay attention to the language. It's a project budget versus a construction budget. And the biggest portion of the project budget. So when you get a question, read the question carefully. It's one of those exams that's kind of long and it's easy to start thinking you know what you read. So what's the biggest portion of the project budget? Bonds and insurance, products and systems, and labor. Now we have methods of estimating construction costs for the budget. We can estimate costs per measured unit, which is usually done early on in a project using Uniformat. We have component costs, which is also done early in a project, and systems costs, which is also done early in a project. And you will be hearing a lot more about this later on in further sessions. So contingencies. So what I'd like to point out here is contingencies are important all the way through your process, the whole process of construction and the project. So estimating requires contingencies to account for unquantifiable effects of unknowns. And these are examples of unknowns. And just a list to be familiar with. There's plenty more. Again, highlighted in red it's very prevalent in renovation projects. If you look in your guide, there are some recommendations in 6.74 for percentages that I cannot recall if they're actually going to test you on the percentages, but what you want to note about 6.74 is that early in the project, the contingency is going to be higher at project conception. And as we get through the design documents, we can reduce that contingency. One caveat to that is the renovation. Renovation projects, you generally would want to keep a 12 to 15% range because there's more of a chance that you would find an unknown. And contingency should always be included in a project budget for both design and construction portions of the project. Okay, we're going to go on to, we're still in project conception. We're going to now talk about the final topic under project conception, which is project scheduling. And project scheduling is vital to the success of a project. And a well-prepared schedule can make the difference between a project that progresses smoothly and one that is characterized by delays and other problems. And I don't know how many architects are out there, but I really don't like looking at the schedule, but I have learned how important the schedule is. And coming from the owner's perspective, I've learned as an owner how important it is to contribute milestones that are specifically important to the owner in the schedule and to take that schedule very seriously. So a good schedule is reasonably accurate. It's a guideline, right? We can adjust the schedule, but it helps us keep that process going and it helps us reach that goal. So the good schedule will clearly identify the owner's project delivery requirement. It's a tool for managing each stage and milestone. And it's a tool for measuring performance. And again, you would get questions such as, what is a tool? What are tools for managing delivery? What are tools for measuring performance? We're going to go on now to the second part of this session outline, which is project delivery. And we're going to talk about design and construction services and documentation. This is the first area. So the roles. When you hear the design team is the AE, the architect engineer, and they are those responsible to convey the owner's goals and objectives. So the AE is a common term. And another important thing about CSI and CDT is that we all speak the same language. We talked about that a little bit before, that being on the same page with the same language makes it much easier to move and a project through and have a successful project. And you will find that the exam, as I said earlier, is very language specific. So these are terms that will make it easier for everyone involved. Everybody from a subcontractor to a vendor to an inspector, we want to use that same language so that we can talk to one another. Okay, the responsibilities of the design team. And again, these questions would be kind of asked in reverse. You know, they'll give you a list of responsibilities and ask you, you know, is this something that is a contractor responsibility or a design team responsibility? The AE is in charge of preparing the program. The AE designs the project. And the AE is responsible for the design to meet the codes, material selections, preparation of the contract documents, and administers the construction contract. So keywords in that is the AE administers the construction contract. and they prepare the contract documents. Design team characteristics. You might have a single practitioner or a larger firm, and they often include subconsultants. Documents prepared by the design team are referred to instruments of service. And again, another term that is important to understand, which is the instruments of service, and understand what that means. Did you have anything to add to that? Okay. So now the roles. Who is responsible for delivering the project? And the answer is the contractor team is responsible for delivering that. And they are responsible for the compliance with the documents. So here we have the difference between our design team and our contractor team. Delivering the project and compliance with the documents, that's the contractor team. And we have another listing of responsibilities. Again, I think you already had the session on A201 general conditions. And again, I stress going through that and understanding that contract. And that works hand in hand with that Division 1. So the contractor team responsibilities. You have construction services and what construction requires. And any questions at this time?
At this point, nobody's typed up any questions. So again, as we're proceeding along, go ahead and hit that quote button, and you can type up questions, and we can answer them during these sessions.
Okay. So again, this is the second part of the session, project delivery. We're going to talk about the tripartite relationship among the owner, the contractor, and the AE. And I'll be honest, I'm old enough where there was a time when everybody thought that the architect ran the show, but obviously as you work, you realize that's not true. And what's most important is this mutual respect in this relationship. And we're going to talk about that further. So, and this also has to do with contractual relationships. So the owner and the contractor, they sign a contract for construction, which is known as the agreement. The AE is linked by the general conditions, which is A201, but is not a party of the construction agreement. So we have two contracts in this tripartite relationship.
We've talked about this in 2 previous presentations. So again, this shows the importance of understanding that relationship.
A note that the chapter has, and this is true, is that it's really important to not mix contracts. So you'll see throughout your study materials references to the AIA documents as well as the engineering contracts. And also the contractor, AGC has their own version of contracts. You need to stick with one. Also included is design build. But there will be conflicts. These contracts have been gone through. Nothing's perfect, but at least all these contracts have a record, or they've been put through the paces.
Through the test of the courts.
That's true. Still on project delivery, we're going to talk about factors affecting project delivery. This is a really important subject area. 2 of the red plus signs. And what you're looking at is the triangle. This is also in your study guide. What we have is cost, extent, and time. And all 3 of those affect quality, and quality is in the center. And as you're working through your project, you will realize that there's going to be some give and take in either cost, extent, or time. So quality, define quality. Quality is a balance between the scope, the budget, and time. and the owner's capabilities affect project delivery. How experienced is your owner? Is this I'll give you an example of somebody building a house for the first time. There's going to be a lot more hand-holding than working with on a federal project or a state project where you are working with project managers that also have experience. The time, the extent of work, the scope, the complexity. The time is, I'd like to emphasize, because this is, I think, where we all seem to end up lately, is that everybody wants something done in a short amount of time, and that affects cost, because, of course, now you have people having to work on hours that are not probably traditional, and that meaning more so the contractor than the rest of us. So the cost of work, specifically the budget, these are different types of cost of work, and these you need to be familiar with. This is something that I would say is kind of good flashcard material. You have a stipulated lump sum, you have a unit price, you have a cost plus fee, fixed fee, and a guaranteed maximum price, penalties, bonuses, incentives, shared savings, liquidated damages. These are all things that you need to understand, and you need to understand how penalties, bonuses, and incentives might affect which project delivery system that you use. And again, we've got a highlighted area. Time is money. Time may have direct influence on the project delivery method chosen for a project and services provided. Many examples of that: when you have a long period of time, you might want to select design build, because you have two parties in a contractual relationship and they need to work with each other for, let's say, 2 or 3 years. In the same respect, you might have a fast track project and you might have to use multiple prime contractors, fast track, and in that case you might want to use a different method of delivery. So now we're going to discuss the specific contract types, but I believe that you'll be going through this in more detail later. So we have a prime contract or a subcontract, depending on the project delivery method. And again, understand specifically what the project delivery methods are. So the prime could be an architect or a contractor or a specialty supplier. Each of those would have a sub-agreement. And there could also be multiple prime contracts depending on the complexity of a project. So, for example, an owner might have a contract with a contractor and a separate contract with a furniture supplier, and each of those would have multiple sub-agreements. The most important thing to note here is that the subcontract agreements will always be subservient to the prime agreement, and that the contract provisions flow down through the contract root system, which again goes back to our A201, Division 1. I have been on projects where we've had a subcontractor who subbed out the work, and I'll be honest, it's a little bit hard to go through that system, but everybody is still obligated to comply, even if they subcontract out their own work. Okay, now we're going to talk about a single prime contract, and it's referring to the construction contract as a single contract between the owner and one general contractor. This is a traditional contract, and it's the simplest form of contract. And it's often used in design, bid, build. Design, bid, build, at least when I started out, that was pretty much the only thing that anyone was doing. Of course, that's changed, but surprisingly, owners owners are asking to go back to that.
Yeah, in particular, as far as taking the exam, and most of the exam and most of the discussions here revolve around this traditional design, bid, build, single prime contract. And not to confuse you, because we'll be talking about various different sorts of contracts. So if the question is about different sorts of contracts, then you'll need to know that. But in particular, if you can remember that most of the other questions are based upon a single prime traditional contract.
And that's true. And I always find that interesting because we have come into all these other delivery methods. So now we're going to talk about multiple prime contracts. It's very complex. These are projects where the examples used would be a roadway, probably this 275 work you see going through Tampa, a bridge. But these are examples where you would have the multiple prime contracts. It might involve one CM that oversees the entire project, and there will be more about this later in the presentation. Actually, I'd like to go back for 1 second. Important to note here, this is the type of contract that you would use when you're fast tracking a project. You want to fast track a project, you want to maybe release the civil portion, the foundation portion, and this is a good example. And again, this would be a scenario type question that, you have a tight schedule, but you need to get started, and you will be having probably some early release packages.
And preferably when you have an educated owner, because this is a complicated contract to administer and to manage. And so you need a educated owner who understands what it takes to manage such a contract.
So again, we're in the second part of the session outline, project delivery. We're going to now talk about the facility life cycle project delivery stage. This is where we're at in the stage of this cycle. As you can see from the graph, we are moving to the next area of discussion, and there are a number of project delivery methods that we will review. And the CM might include a contractor. What we're going to see in the next slides is that we're going to talk about the contractor, the CM, the construction manager, as an advisor or agent or contractor. Outlined here are the different delivery methods. Design, bid, build is what Don referred to as what this exam is about. That's the most traditional. We also have design, negotiate, build. We have construction management. That can be CMA or CMC, which is agent or advisor or contractor. Design build, owner build, and integrated project delivery. IPD is the newest form of delivery. I only know of California moving towards this, trying to make this work. I can tell you I've had every contract type here, delivery system, except for owner build and the IPD. And I definitely have my opinion on what needs to happen. Highlighted here, again, we talked about you can have a construction management firm as an agent or advisor. They could also be only the contractor. You could have two. In that case, if you have a CMA and a CMC, you basically have one CM watching the other. We're going to talk about, again, the most traditional, design, bid, build. You'll see throughout these slides, you'll see areas highlighted. And again, they're highlighted to emphasize that tripartite relationship. And with these diagrams, you'll see dashed lines that link everyone to the general conditions and how the correspondence is supposed to flow. And it is supposed to flow through the architect. And I, as an owner, am guilty of not remembering that, but that is the way it is established contractually. And again, we want to all be on the same page. We're working as a team, and we want one point of communication, and that point of communication is the architect. And it doesn't hurt to remind the owner or whoever else you need to that to make this successful, that's the way it needs to go. And we already discussed that this is the most common and traditional form of project delivery. So design, bid, build, we've got advantages. So you want to pay attention to these next two slides. You want to be familiar with the content within the construction industry, and this also involves a set price. So again, this question would be turned around: what delivery system involves a set price? So advantages, we have, it's a very familiar, it's one of, it's what we've done for years. Because it's familiar, there's efficiencies. People know what they're dealing with and what the expectations are. The contract amount is set by bidding. So it's going to be the lowest cost and competitive bidding. And schedules are easier to be established as a straight line, no overlapping activities, and it's the simplest form of a contract. And then we have the disadvantages. And bid day surprise, the project is delayed if the bids are too high, the owner does not proceed. A redesign might be required, and for those of you designers out there, A&Es, a lot of times in the past there was no additional fee. We were expected to bring this in within the budget, and there wasn't additional fee in redesign to reissue and rebid. It's inherently adversarial due to low bid and resultant claims and disputes. You do have increased RFIs, and there is a potential for bid shopping. We're going to move on to design, negotiate, build. And again, we have the tripartite relationship. So this process, design, negotiate, build, is similar to a CMC. The costs are negotiated with the contractor, and a GMP is established. The key here is the GMP is established before the documents are 100%. So this is most commonly used in the private sector, and it's similar to the construction manager as contractor. The contractor is selected based on qualifications, their relationship with the owner, not necessarily the low bidder. And the question here that you might get, is this a single prime or a multiple prime contract? And the answer is that it would be a single. We're going to go on to advantages, and then the next slide, disadvantages. Again, these are the type of questions you're going to get. You see the plus sign. And I'm just going to go ahead and run through these real quick. We've got disadvantages, and these are all in your book. In this case, the important thing to note that the owner in this case is financially committed without knowing the final costs in design, negotiate, build. Next, we have project delivery, contractor as CM as contractor. This process allows the CM to participate in pre-construction activities. Again, it helps establish a GMP early on, and it moves into the contractor in this case can move into the CMC would be the contractor, on this process. And So the important thing to note, the CM may work as an agent of the owner in the CMA type delivery method. The CMA does not serve as a contractor in this role, and the duties are primarily administrative. And so it's really, you're hiring another contractor as an advisor to the owner and to the project. We're going back to construction management as a contractor. You would use this if it's fast tracked. That's probably the main thing you want to know here. But definitely go through advantages and benefits. And you also want to quickly go through and understand the disadvantages and limitations. These are the type of criteria that they're going to ask you about, not so much what is a CMC, but what's the advantage of a CMC? Is this, and again, you'll have to pick 2 or pick 3. We have design build. Generally, in this case, the AE works for the contractor, and this is because of bonding capacity. However, sometimes you will see a design build team led by an AE. But again, this comes down to the AE's ability to provide bonding capacity. Licensing and insurance can be an issue. And so in this case, most of the time you will see either a design build company or the architect contracting, entering into an agreement with the contractor as a design build entity. Design build, it's a single contract. That's the most important thing to note about design build. We have one contract. So the owner signs one contract with an entity. And this alleviates any finger pointing, and it's one of the most distinguishing factors about design build. However, it does kind of, the architect has always been kind of an advocate of the owner. In this case, that's not going to be the case, because the architect in this case is working for the contractor, and that role as advisor that the architect traditionally has taken in the past doesn't quite pan out in this case. So again, we have advantages. A design build contract may be our contract, one for design and a second for construction. So this is important to note. Even though you have one contract with the owner, you may have a 2-part contract for design, one contract for design and one for the GMP. And we've got disadvantages. And in this case with design build, the owner prepares a design criteria package. And again, who prepares that package? It's the owner, to establish the preferences, standards, and goals.
And again, it goes back to the fact of how well educated is your owner, what are their capabilities, do they truly understand what their design criteria needs to be without the assistance of a design team.
Now we're going to go to owner build, which is it's a very risky proposition. Owner build requires an experienced owner due to increased liability and risk, and most owners do not want to assume that liability and risk. We're going to talk quickly about advantages and disadvantages. You can read through these. It is a greater risk to the AE when an owner performs the construction. The owner might be more inclined to pursue deficient design claims to recover lost profits. And again, this is something that is not done very often. I cannot quite see or give you an example of that. A P3, this is also fairly new. It's a public-private partnership. This has been used by universities. I know throughout the Southeast, it's used by government entities to finance, construct, maintain, and provide improvements. The primary benefit is the transfer of risk. The secondary benefit is reduction in public sector out-of-pocket costs or bonding. And it's a variation of a design build. And P3 projects are implemented through various contractor arrangements.
A key thing to remember is in a lot of these P3s, it's because the owner doesn't have the capital. And the design build firm is typically providing the capital, providing the funding associated with it. Lots of times the contractor will actually go out to and get bonds or go to the bank, and often the design builder will simply lease the facility also to the owner who will build it.
IPD, there's a AIA document that you will want to reference. It's actually available as a PDF free online. Integrated project delivery. It did start in California. It is a blend of design, build, and teaming. The main thing you want to know here, there is now one contract. Everybody in this project delivery method signs one single contract. And the one contract that I'm familiar with, the project was quite a ways through before all the attorneys agreed on the contract. But again, this is something that you want to go through. We might see a shift in leadership in this contract, and it's a lot about shared leadership. This is the document. It's available again online as a PDF. It's used, the only time I've seen it used is for hospitals. Important to note, life cycle cost as well as first cost considerations, risk and reward balanced and value based. And again, the idea of one contract is that we all share in that reward. So we all share in the success, and we all share in the reward if there are bonuses for early delivery. I really don't know what to say to this. I haven't personally experienced this, but please go through this and understand what the advantages are. And the most important thing, it's a collaborated, integrative, and productive teams composed of key project participants. This is very expertise-based, and it's principle-driven, and technology is crucial. The use of BIM is crucial. And again, single contract for everyone, and there is shared costs and rewards. We're all in it together.
One point to bring out is you have to have a very sophisticated owner who understands construction and design very well, so that it's not a contract in which you're there to educate the owner.
That's true, and I can tell you, I think you'll see this more with a private owner, developer than public, because this is a risk that is not, the public sector is probably not ready to take. It's similar to CM and design build, but IPD is up and coming. Big word here again, collaborative, mutual respect and trust, mutual benefit and reward. It's innovation, it's decision making. You're involving everybody at the beginning. You have to define the goal early. You cannot wait to the end of the project to decide, or bring your engineers in to design the system. So there is a lot of time up front to get issues resolved. It's all open communication, it's technology based, and it is about organizational behavior and leadership.
It's about working together. In particular, the collaborate is a key component of it. You need to have a team attitude. The engineers need to be willing to listen to the contractors, and vice versa. The entire team needs to listen. You may even change some of the owner's programming in order to provide other basic benefits. So basically, it's open in all respects.
And for me, the key to this, and actually any delivery, but especially with IPD, is mutual respect and trust. I think we should have that anyway, but in this particular case, it's a primary principle of IPD. So we talked about it being collaborative, innovation, and decision making. The architect may not have much control. That's probably the thing to note the most. Again, we talked about design, bid, build, where the architect is really an agent of that owner. Now we're starting to share responsibility, share control, and be willing to come in at different times and take the lead when needed. And a very important term to understand is consensus. What that means, consensus, if any of you are lead APs know that consensus is what drives a lot of their decisions. I think that's probably the most important thing, is that you are in agreement and harmony, and that you support that decision. It may not be a decision you agree with, but you are one entity and you are going to move forward with the consensus vote. So again, we talked about early involvement, how important it is to make decisions early on, how important it is to have mutual respect for combined knowledge and early stage decision making. And clients, your owner, they're going to have to be ready to make some decisions up front. So things are not going to be able to wait towards the end of this process. Goals need to be defined early. And again, these goals are set by the team, not by one person, not by the owner. The owner is part of the team. And these are principles. You can go through these. It's definitely intensified planning. It is open communication. Again, we want to avoid finger pointing. We want appropriate technology. And it needs to be transparent. And being transparent is part of that open communication. It's organization and leadership. I believe Cal Poly actually is teaching a class in that. Organizational behavior. There has to be a leader in the process. And that leader may be, one during the design process might be the lead architect. And then you have to be willing to shift that role to the contractor at a different point, perhaps during bidding and construction. So IPD is not the only solution. It is one solution. Different roles for architects. Professional liability insurance is problematic. These are issues that come along with it. The architect definitely has less control over the design. So creativity might be limited by practical or fear of the unknown.
Keep in mind there's not a lot of case law with integrated project deliveries, so that's why professional liability insurance can be problematic. However, in discussing this with insurance carriers, they really like the idea that you're all signing one contract, and they really like the idea that you can't sue each other unless there's blatant, flagrant fault associated with what you're doing. So the insurance companies actually are embracing it. It's just a function of the fact that it's so new there is no case law to back up the insurance rates associated with it.
And I'm just going to go through these quickly because I know I'm running over on time, and I'm not sure, but I believe you have handouts. These are all things we're pretty much repeating what we've already talked about. One contract. That's the primary lesson here. And again, these principles we've talked about over the past few slides. This is a comparison. There's some slides that compare the different project delivery methods. I'm not going to go into detail, but this is something that you want to understand is you know, the way these last three slides are set up are in terms of time and cost and scope, which is what we talked about early on: time, cost, scope. And this is these are tables, three tables that look at each delivery method and how they affect time or cost or scope. This last slide here is scope. Going to go into team selection process briefly. And again, emphasis really should be on skills, harmonious group of people, allowing time for people to do their work properly. It's usually based on selecting a design service consultant is based on qualifications and experience. That's what it should be based on. Unique skills. You definitely don't want to go with a residential architect for a hospital project, right? So most of this you'll find is common sense. And again, selecting contractor services, it depends on the delivery method, and you don't always necessarily want to go with the low bidder. And you do want to have a good relationship or previous relationship with the owner or architect. And the same goes for a construction manager and a design builder. And commissioning, you'll hear, this is something that you will want to review in your study guide. Total project commissioning. There are a lot of different types of commissioning. Most times what you see are systems and equipment commissioning, which mainly in the past has been test and balance. Now total project commissioning, it begins with conception and continues through facility management. And again, that facility management life cycle at the end of the building begins the new life of the building, whatever that might be. So again, the key thing here is it begins with conception. And this is a review. And then that's about it. And again, I apologize for running over. I know
you're fine. We don't have any questions signed up. We'll take a minute here just in case anybody has any questions for Suchi. Yeah. If not, we'll call it a program. Thank you very much, Suchi. And she will be back next week and finish up the project. I'll talk to you later. Thanks.